Hello, Blood Bowlers. Welcome back to episode 3. A little bit of a pause, but we're back. We're going to look at how you kind of set up your first game in this episode. So we previously already looked at, what Blood Bowl is and how you roster a team, which is actually quite a complex thing. But now we hope that we're at a point where you're going to have 2 brand new teams and you're going to be able to put them on the pitch and kind of get started, really. So this episode is going to look at what you need to do within this to start with, look at in this to start with of how you kind of prep the game. There's a few little roles you need to make. There's a big chunk of pre-game sequence that we're not going to focus on. We'll quickly detail it, but that's for like a later episode when things start getting a bit, there's a bit of discrepancy between teams. And then we're going to jump on the pitch and we're going to have a little look into how you kind of set up as a beginner. So it's totally for beginners. And how you kind of can get prepped for the game. So we're going to be using the Black Hawk team. I think my team's called the Crag Peak Crumpers. And we've got an Elven Union team, the Yalarial Unicorns. So what we'll do, we'll quickly jump into this and then we'll jump onto the pitch. All right, Blood Bowlers. So you're got to this stage where you are actually now ready to start your first game, whether you're playing against, a friend, a family, whatever it might be. You've kind of got your 2 rosters set up. So we're now going to look at, as we just discussed, what you need to now actually do to start playing the game. So we're going to look quickly through the rule book just to showcase a few little bits that need to be done before we get to the pitch. So what you need to do to effectively set up the game is run through this kind of pre-game sequence. So at the very beginning, both coaches roll a D3 to determine how many fans are there. So they roll a D3 and then they add their dedicated fan characteristic that's on their team roster to that dice number. So effectively we'll be rolling an example. If we had a dedicated fans of 2, we would now have 8,000 fans who've turned up. And that shows how many fans have turned up for each coach. So each coach rolls a dice, adds their dedicated fans. So that's how you get to that point there. And this will come into effect later on after the game's finished. So once you've played the whole game, you'll look back at this and it will determine cash and other things. You'll also have to roll for the weather as well. So in that situation, both coaches will roll a dice. So it's a 2d6 roll. And then you will roll it, each coach, and you will get a weather result. So there's a table here, and there are also other tables that certain pitches make use of that you may want to use for like thematic reasons or just for a bit of fun. But this is the standard weather table. So very often between a 4 and a 10, the weather is perfect, because there's no real effect on the game. But the more extremes of the 2d6 roll will have effects. So you may want to make a little note for yourself just to say, right, we've got a blizzard, so we have to remember to, -1 for rushing, I think it is, and a few other bits and bobs. So yeah, if you've got some odd weather, just to keep a little reminder of it. However, I would recommend maybe for your first game, maybe for your first couple of games at least, especially when you're learning the game, just kind of ignore the weather maybe. Just go for that perfect conditions to start with. It could always change in the game, but we'll get to that in a moment. So what you'll then need to do before you even start putting any models on the table is you're going to want to consider taking on Journeyman. So Journeyman and Inducements, we're going to sort of look at like roughly and like quite quickly for now, because we're kind of looking at this as if it's your first ever game. You've just rostered a team. So in that situation, you should have 11 players and you shouldn't need to take on Journeyman. But Journeyman are required when you don't have 11 players to take onto the field effectively. So when that happens, you need to hire some of your kind of lineman positionals. And they are effectively they're the same in every regard, except that they gain the loner special rule. You can purchase them later on if you think, actually I'll buy that guy because he got some good SPP. So we'll get into that in the post game. But Journeymen are effectively required a couple of games in. Maybe you had a bit of a battering in the previous game. and you want to and you've got less than 11 players and you haven't had the money to buy anybody else. So that's when you would take on Journeyman. So that's an important step, because the next step is Inducements. I'm not going to go into exactly what that is now, because it's quite a big chunk of kind of information. It probably needs like an entire episode on it. But effectively, it's a way of creating parity between the team that's the most, or the not most expensive, but the most kind of prolific, and the team that's less prolific. So it's kind of like a balancing act. So a team that's got a load of skills, load of good players, will have a higher team value, which is what we talked about in the previous episode. And a team which has been a bit beaten up will have a lower team value. And that difference allows that coach who's on the lower end, allows that coach to effectively fill in the gaps with a few extra bits and bobs, whether that's hire a star player, hire some extra coaching staff, you name it. That's what it will do. So that's Inducements. Now, the next part that is a new piece to the rules anyway is the prayers to Nuffle table. So for every 50,000 gold piece difference that you have after the Inducements, so it can go both ways. You don't effectively spend it, but you get it for free anyway. That allows you to roll once on the prayers to Nuffle table, which is this huge D16 roll. So in your first couple of games, a lot of this page probably aren't really going to come into effect, especially for your first game in a league or just for a bit of fun. So you almost don't really want to think too much about these for now, but it's definitely something we'll touch on. You will get chances to roll on the prayers to Nuffle table during the game, and you might end up having to change the weather during the game. We'll get into that on the kickoff events. And then the final little thing before we get onto the pitch is to determine the kicking team. So whether or not you want to flip a coin, it kind of says here however you want to do it in some regards, but some people decide to roll off. So one team will roll, another team will roll, and then the team that won the toss, in this case, would be the Orc team. They get to choose if they want to kick or receive. And then if you flip a coin, I guess you flip it and your opponent calls it before it lands. So that's sort of how you kind of get prepped for the game. Your first game should be quite quick and simple to get prepped for. You both can probably be around TV 1000. So you're both just going to want to put everything on the pitch and get started. So with that said, let's get a little look at the pitch. All right, Blood Bowlers. So we're at the pitch. Finally made it. Just quickly on all of those pre-match rolls that we discussed, is the kind of thing that you can kind of roll once you're all set up. You can kind of get your table out, your pitch on it, and get your dice out, get your teams ready. And then you make all of those rolls while you're kind of chatting with your opponent about what your team is, what it does, all the kind of normal stuff. Grab a beer, do whatever it is you need to do. But once you can only really start the game once you've got those pre-game pieces done. You don't need to do them, in advance of the game. You don't need to do them before you sort of get your stuff out, basically. You can kind of do it all as one thing, but you definitely need to get to that stage where you are basically kind of kicking off. So once you've kind of rolled for the kickoff, that's when you want to start putting your positionals down. So we've got both our teams on the pitch here. We've got our Black Orcs on this side, and then we've got the Elven Union on the other side over here. The camera is not the most amazing quality, but this is just really just to detail what the pitch is and where players can go. So we've got all our tokens on the pitch for now, just to sort of show you that we've got them, but we're going to pop them away for now so you can kind of see what goes where. So we're going to need this in a moment for the kickoff, but we'll keep it off to the side just for now. Okay, so the pitch is here set up. We've got the dugouts below, and I'm going to show them set up in a moment. But just quickly, I want to detail kind of what the pitch is. So we've kind of got straight down the middle here the line of scrimmage, which is directly down the middle of the pitch. So each half is a team's half for each kickoff. It might be at the beginning of the game or at some point during the match. So that's the line of scrimmage. That dictates the two sides of the pitch. And then you've also got the two end zones here and here. Now, they are only one square wide, but you can actually go into them if required. It's not like they're no man's land unless you've got the ball. Players can kind of move through those spaces like normal. But it is a bit dangerous being at the edge of the pitch, and we'll get into that in a later episode. So you've additionally then got in your half, like in this one, for example, you've got your two wide zones, which are these wide zones here. They're effectively the final four squares of your half of the pitch. Now, when you're setting up a game, you need to make sure that you've got at least 3 players on the line of scrimmage. So they have to basically be adjacent to the line of scrimmage. I can't quite remember what they call it in the book, but it's called something like the central zone or something like that. So you effectively need to have 3 players on this line. So if you're an offensive team, which we'll set up first, they have to have 3 on the line. Then they can only have a maximum of 2 players in each wide zone. So it might be that you've got 2 players in these kind of positions and 2 players here, but you don't have to. You can have all of your players in, we'll call it the midfield, in this central area here. So that's how it works for both teams in terms of setting up. All pitches should be the same size. It's worth checking. They should also have these little trapdoors in these squares, because there's a few different cards that can use them, but for now we won't detail it. So that's kind of where we are at with how you kind of set your team up. So what we want to do now is we want to kind of imagine we're rolling a kind of roll off to see which team wins. So we've kind of done all of our other prep. We've rolled our fans. We know what the weather's like. We've got some fantastic Blood Bowl weather. So we're going to roll off. So each team will roll a dice. You can also flip a coin. So the Blackhawks are going to roll a 2. Hopefully you can see that. And the Elves are going to roll a 3. So the Elf, or the Elven Union coach, in this case the Unicorns coach, will get to decide whether they want to kick or receive the ball. So kicking the ball means that you will go second and set up first. Receiving the ball means that you will go first and you set up second. So the Elven Union coach decides that they are going to receive the ball. What that instantly means is that the Blackhawk team become the kicking team and the Elven Union team become the receiving team. And that's how the game will pan out for the first half. This team will go first, followed by this team. And we've already talked about turnovers and things like that. So what we're going to do now is quickly set up both teams. And then we will roll a kickoff event and do the kickoff. And once we get to that point, we'll call it there and we'll move on to the next episode. So because the Elves decided to receive the ball, the Blackhawks have to set up. So they've got their 11 players here. They've got 5 Blackhawks, or Blackhawk blockers, I think they're called now. And you've got the 5 little goblins and a singular troll. So they're going to set up by doing, effectively getting all the big guys on the front of the pitch here like this. So they're going to have 4 of their Blackhawks on the line. So you can have more than 3 on the line of scrimmage, but you can see here that line dictating the line of scrimmage is now contacted by these guys. So then we're just going to place a few additional players around. So just going to move the dice out of the way. And we can only have 2 in the wide zones. So we're going to plop maybe 1 here and here. And we're also going to pop 2 others over there. And then we've got basically only 2 guys left. So maybe just sort of plug these gaps like this, maybe. Just like that. So we're going to try to plug in any sort of openings so that those elves can't just dance on through. So you can instantly see now we've got one heck of a meat shield on the front of the line. And the elves are going to struggle to fight with that. So the defensive team is now done. So they're now prepped and ready to go. They know they're going second. And they know that they're about to kick the ball. So now the offensive team, or the receiving team, now has to set up the same. So the elves, I believe, may have a few spares. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No, they've only got 11 players as well. So they are going to effectively set up their 3 on the line that they need to. Kind of a little bit like this. They're going to pop some linemen on the line of scrimmage, maybe just to sort of get away. So you've seen here the elves sort of trying to stay away from the Black Orcs a little bit, because they know that if something goes wrong and there's a turnover, they're all going to be able to start smashing them, and they don't have a lot of strength to do the same thing back. So the Elven Union is a good kind of thing to kind of think about, is that they're going to be receiving the ball, and it does deviate quite a lot. So they're going to be wanting to keep probably their thrower here somewhere in the backfield. So he's probably going to want to sit somewhere here, because that ball could go anywhere in this half. In the blitzes, we're going to put one in this wide zone, one in this wide zone, alongside one of the catches. So we've got 2 catches here, the 2 blitzes, the rest are all linemen other than a thrower. And then we might just kind of keep kind of a close guard and a close eye on the middle here, just to stop anything from coming through that we don't want. So the receiving team's now set up. So we're all prepped there. Effectively now the ball's going to be kicked from the defensive team to this side of the pitch. So they've kept one player back, and the elves are quite quick and agile. He'll be able to move to that ball, but it already looks quite offensive in terms of how the elves are going to try and bash their way through and try and score. But let's get the ball, and then we'll actually roll a kickoff. So as mentioned previously, we have little ball tokens. You know, you can get these from different tournaments, different places. Pretty decent little thing you can pick up. I'm sure you can probably find things on eBay. However, if you do fancy using like the little plastic balls that come with the teams and you want to paint them up, feel free. There's no right or wrong way of doing anything. Of course, we're going to use this just for this, because you can see where the ball's going to land. So the kicking team now needs to decide a square in the opposing team's half that they want to place the ball. So it's a good opportunity now to bring this back. So we're going to pop this down as a little bit of a reference. So we've got our random deviation template here. So whenever you kick off, a player can only kick the ball if they are not in a wide zone. I think they have to have their tackle zones, and I don't think they can be on the line of scrimmage. Yeah, they can't be on this line. So most of the time it doesn't matter. There will be some skills, which means that you do need to pick that specific player. But that's something for, you know, a little bit later on in your league season. So in this situation, we're actually going to pick this little goblin. He's going to kick the ball. So he's actually going to be the guy to place it. Now, every time you roll a deviation, you roll a D8 alongside one of the D6s as well. So this is how you deviate. You'll be using the D8 to determine direction and the D6 for the number of squares. So you can already consider, 6 squares this way or this way, and you might cause something called a touchback. Now, a touchback is where the ball either scatters off the pitch, scatters into the other half, or maybe bounces into the other half or bounces off the pitch. If for any reason the ball isn't on the pitch after the kickoff, then you basically get to give it to a player. So what we'll do, we'll quickly show our kickoff as per normal, and then we'll show what happens if there's a touchback. So we're going to place the ball right bang in the middle there. So the goblin's kicking the ball. He's aiming for this square. And now we'll roll the D6 and D8 to determine where it goes. So it's going in direction 7, 3 squares, which is, according to our little template here, diagonally this way. So this ball's going to go 1, 2, 3. So the ball's about to land here, and that's an important thing to remember. It's about to land here. It hasn't landed here yet. Now, I'm just going to place a little marker here to show you where the ball goes. We'll come back to that in a minute. Now, let's say, for example, we place the ball, let's put it here. We decided to kick the ball nice and shallow, and we'd rolled that, 3 and a 7. It would go 1, 2, 3. That would be where the ball's about to land. Now we do the kickoff event, which we'll do in a minute, for where the ball previously was for our first roll, but that would cause a touchback. So if at the end of the kickoff event, that ball is still not in this half, then the elfin coach basically gets to place this ball on one of their players for free. So the elfin coach would probably go, there you go. So that means he no longer has to roll to pick the ball up. It means he doesn't have to move to the ball. If there's a touchback, go straight to a player of your choice for free. Basically, the referee gives him the ball. Of course, that's not what we're going into. So that's where our ball was going to land from the first kickoff. So before it lands, so imagining this ball's high in the sky, it's about to go here. You then roll on the kickoff event. So this is a table in the rule book where you get to effectively roll 2d6, which in this case, it is the kicking team who rolls. So the kicking team gets to roll on these dice. They kick the ball, and now they roll on the table. So in this situation, they'll roll 7, which is brilliant coaching. I won't go into what all of them are, but there's a whole host of different things that can happen. There can be a riot, which means that the turn marker goes backwards. You can gain re-rolls. The weather can change. You can basically roll blitz, which means that the kicking team gets to have like a free turn for some of their players. So it's worth reading through that, through some of the options, what that might happen, because there's a whole host of different things, and they can actually change the game quite a bit. So in this case, a 7 is, as I said, brilliant coaching, which means that each coach rolls a d6. Each coach rolls a d6 and adds the number of assistant coaches on their team draft list. The coach with the highest total gains 1 extra team reroll for the game ahead, or for the drive ahead. If this team reroll is not used before the end of the drive, it is lost. So effectively, in regards to rerolls, if you have 3 normally, you then get 4 for this drive if you win that dice roll. And effectively, both coaches roll a d6, and then they add their coaching staff to the roll in that particular example. So we'll roll it and we'll see what we get, just to kind of show you what you would do as coaches. So both coaches would roll. In this case, the Blackhawks would get a free reroll. So we'll shuffle that on in a minute just so you can see. But the Elven Union won't, because neither team have got any assistant coaches, which is something maybe for now you might actually go for. So in the case of a tie, though, if both teams tie, then neither coach gets an additional reroll. So unlike previous editions where normally both coaches get one, neither coach get one instead. So that's an interesting little change. So anyway, we'll have a look at the dugouts in a minute, but we want to just detail now what happens with this ball. So the ball is hurtling through the sky. Both the coaching staff teams have kind of been having a go at their players. They managed to inspire the Blackhawks to get an extra reroll for this drive. Big thumbs up for them. Now the ball effectively lands right in this square. So it hits the deck and then bounces 1 time. Of course, it goes off the pitch. It bounces 1 more time off the ground in direction 8. It nestles itself just there. So the ball always goes 1 more time. There's a few other situations where it might go again, or it might scatter in the air extra time. So make sure you read your kickoff events very carefully. Let's say it's here again and suddenly you roll a 4. It would actually land on this player. So this player would actually get a chance to catch it. Now, it isn't a decent sort of catch. So the player's got to do a sort of straight agility roll to grab that out of the sky, I believe. But we'll detail that at a later date, because it's not a perfect ball to grab hold of. So players do get a chance to catch it. And it's also worth noting that if that player does fail to catch it, it will then bounce 1 more time, land on the ground, but it is not a turnover because it's still not the receiving team's turn yet. So if he grabbed the ball out of the sky, it would have been turn 1, let's go. But because he hasn't, it's not a turnover. So don't worry. It doesn't mean that the Blackhawk team can now just suddenly shovel forward because there's been a turnover. That's not the case. So just keep that in mind. So the dugouts I've had to just keep off to the side because, well, this is very big, this pitch, you know. But these new dugouts are quite dinky. So I'm just going to show you how we would set them up. So we've got a few spare tokens for both teams. As I hope you can see, I've just placed them to the side. But we've got our re-rolls. little tokens on each. You know, reroll number 1, reroll number 2, just there like that. We've also got our turn marker prepped and ready to start moving forward through the turns, and also another one on the score marker if you so desire, to keep a track of, you know, how many touchdowns you've scored, which probably for the elves will be lots. And the same with the Black Orcs. We've got a little token for the touchdowns, token for that. We've also already got 3 rerolls for this team, so make sure you know, when you've rostered your rerolls, make sure you kind of check that on your team roster to see how many you've got. And then just like we just rolled the brilliant coaching dice. This team actually will get a 4th reroll for this drive. Now when the drive ends, let's say the elves score and the, you know, kind of moves on to the next, that would actually be gone. So you actually do lose that. You don't get to keep it for other games, you don't get to keep it for the second half, it just goes. So those are the dugouts. That's how you sort of set your game up and get yourself prepped. And once that ball is now, well, it was there, I think. Well, that ball's on the pitch and everything's ready to go, you can actually start moving your turn marker for turn 1 for the elves, and the receiving team gets to go. So we'll quickly jump off now, and in the next episode we'll quickly detail some kind of information about the turns in general, and then we'll jump into what your players can do in future episodes. Bye bye.